Hi and welcome to Consortium More Than Marketing's podcast. Really excited today to be joined by Tom Blandford from SurSum. As those of you who know me know, my knowledge on finance isn't the hottest, but it is something I am really passionate about. And on my own finances, I have an iron grip on where the money is and where we're making money. So it's hugely fascinating to talk to somebody who helps others that maybe are less good at this stuff. Tom, do you want to tell our audience a little bit about you?
I love the image of an iron grip on finances. That's a thing, isn't it? Hi, I'm Tom. I'm a chartered accountant by training, 20 odd years, all of it in and around law firms. So I trained originally in PwC in their professional practices team. So even as a trainee, I was working with some very large law firms, your DLA Pipers, the Addleshaws of this world. And then more recently, I was a partner at Armstrong Watson, which is the Law Society's only endorsed accountancy firm, or it certainly was. So again, hundreds of law firms there. And then for the last few years, I've been sat in my attic with this brickwork, doing sort of outsourced FD work for law firms. So 20 odd years, a variety of different firms, but all of it is that sort of strategic financial support for law firms.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. And actually, it's been coming up quite a lot recently, obviously, with us entering the next financial year. Finances are probably on the mind of law firms and businesses generally. But we were talking off air a little bit about sort of the biggest issue you're seeing at the moment. And I think what a lot of our listeners will get value from when they listen to these podcasts is normalizing what they're going through and kind of hearing what others are going through as well. So I didn't know if you'd mind sharing what you're kind of seeing at the moment, like what is the biggest problem when it comes to finance and law firms?
How long have you got? If I'm going to pick one, I think I will pick. You're right. So it's a new financial year for most people, yeah, and so the clock resets, right? All of the billing targets reset, and we're back to zero again. I think that, in my humble opinion, too many firms either don't think about their sort of forecasts and their budgets and their cash flows, or will maybe take last year's target and add on 3% of inflation, and that's as much as they do in terms of thinking about the financial strategy for what is now the next 12 months, because we're in the start of the new financial year. So I think there is obviously lots of difficulties in forecasting, and there is all sorts of foibles and reasons why it's tricky. And frankly, if you could predict 12 months from now, then work out next week's lottery numbers and do it that way. But even though it is hard, I still think you should do it. I still think you can do it to an extent. And I think one of my frustrations tends to be those law firms out there who don't even try. And then 3 months from now, 6 months from now, they're very, very surprised when the wheels come off. And I can't help thinking, no, some of these variables you actually did know about. Some of these things you could have foreseen, and you could have put these into your forecasts and your cash flows and your business plans.
When before we joined the call, you were talking about the sort of transactional finance versus strategic finance.
Yes, and I think that's where the sort of root cause of the problem that I'm whinging about comes from. Because if I'm running a law firm, I've obviously got lots of client money, right? And I've got the solicitor's accounts rules, and I'm petrified, rightly so, of getting that wrong. So inevitably, I will be pretty good, in fact, often very good, on my sort of transactional finance. I'll have 2 or 3 cashiers, and they're reconciling that client account every single day, making really sure that those transactions are accurate. And that's good. And I'm not knocking that for a second. But that is certainly much more than your average SME would be doing. Many of them don't reconcile things every month, never mind every day. And because I'm focused on that, and because that's the sort of 2 or 3 people that I've got in my finance function, I've kind of used up, and I've used up the budget sometimes for my finance function. I've certainly used up the sort of time and capacity of those people. And so what I don't do is go a step further and be strategic, because I'm so petrified about getting the transactional wrong. I don't have the time or the inclination, or in some cases the budget, to think about, oh, what about next month? Or what happens if X happens? And what variables are there in X, Y, Z? And can I do some forecasting? And can I look at some of that data? And again, it's that nuance of difference between different sectors, because you wouldn't get that in a retailer. In a retailer, they probably wouldn't be reconciling their transactions every day. I mean, that wouldn't happen. But I bet you all of their stock has got a barcode on it. And so I bet you they know where every single thing is on every single shelf, and how much is in this store and how much is in that warehouse. So it's that sort of slightly different sectoral thing of the finance effort, if you like, in a law firm tends to go on the transactional side rather than the strategic side. And like I say, I think that's a problem.
And it sort of leads me on to the other point again that we discussed off air. I've just been at an event actually, and we were talking about client money. Because naively, probably, I'm learning that I'm quite naive in some of these areas. I had assumed that when the SRA look at client money, they're going to leave it alone and let the law firms do what they're currently doing, because a lot of them, wrongly, rely on that interest income as part of their plans. So if they take it away, again, I may not be right about this, but is there the danger that actually quite a few, particularly on the smaller scale of things, firms are going to fall over because they've been getting quite a nice income, passive income? And if you talk to someone like Paul McCluskey, he would often have said that actually the income on client monies could earn you as much as a fee earner. So presumably this is going to be quite a big problem.
Yeah, yes, it's a short answer to your question. It's completely true to say that many law firms do turn a profit on their client interest, and it's true to say that some of those, that profit is a sizable chunk of their profit at the end of the year. So would some fall over? Potentially. But by way of 2 caveats to that, one is, what an interesting macroeconomic example of my wider point about you can plan for that. If the SRA make that decision, they will announce it with 6, 9, 12 months notice, and you can make allowance for that, and you can fold it into your plans if it happens at all. And I actually hope that they don't, but if it happens at all. But then I guess there becomes a wider point, which is, okay, we're no longer allowed to profiteer on this in the way that the SRA have described it. But providing cashiering services is actually a mainstay of many law firms. If you think of a residential conveyance, part of what you're paying for is a trusted third party that will receive those mortgage funds. And, with no offense to you, Lara, but your mortgage provider does not trust you enough to send you hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds the day before you buy a house because you've told them that tomorrow you're going to buy a house. I mean, come on.
I wouldn't.
Maybe you won't, but a chunk of the UK will get on a plane to somewhere without a UK extradition treaty, and thank you very much, Bank of Scotland, for these hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds. And the same's true in probate, right? I don't necessarily trust my random cousin, so I don't want him or her liquidating the estate of Great Aunt Winifred. I would much rather that the law firm liquidates it and they collect it all in and parcel it out to me and my random cousin. And okay, it's completely true that whilst that law firm's doing the residential conveyancing, it gets like 24 hours of interest. And whilst the probate firm is collecting in Great Aunt Winifred's ISA, it gets a couple of weeks worth of interest. And so is that profiteering? Well, the SRA seems to say that it is. But here comes my point. You are actually offering cashiering services. And some of those clients really, really want you to be that trusted third party that holds that money. So if we really get to the point where you're not allowed to, quote, profiteer on the interest, you start charging for your cashiering services because some clients genuinely value that. And you know what? You will probably end up roughly back where you started. It's actually the clients I feel sorry for because they're now going to be charged more.
Yeah, that makes a really good point. I think, would you say, bearing in mind where we are in the year, that actually the smart firm doesn't factor in interest on client monies in this next financial year, just in case? Because actually, I mean, we've got quite a decent savings account in the business, and I don't factor that in. My accountant puts it somewhere, but I don't want her factoring it into what we're going to generate because it's a nice to have. Like, I'm not doing anything for that money, so it's a happy bonus at the end of the year if it's there. If it's not there, it also doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I would, I would, I would factor it into my plans because again, I'd be doing cash flow forecasts and I'd be thinking about how I'm going to utilize my money to get the best returns on it. But I wouldn't be relying upon it. That's the key distinction. And if you were to say that actually, a particular department or a particular firm is only profitable because of its client interest, then that's a fundamental problem, right? That means that something has gone wrong elsewhere in how that firm is charging or the overheads that that firm is incurring. And so if it's masking a different problem, that's where I'd be worried. If it is, as you say, a nice bonus to have, then great. But I wouldn't be ignoring it. I'd be it would be part of my analysis of what makes up the profit. What is it that we're doing that's profitable? And again, slightly different if you've just whacked a bit of money in an office deposit account because that is passive. But if it's money that you've earned off doing certain bits of client work, like a probate, like a residential conveyance, you've also paid for a cashier. You've also paid for a client money audit. You've also paid various bank fees. So you might be disappointed when you analyze it about actually how profitable was that, bearing in mind all of the costs that sit alongside having a client account.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So I think we probably have a similar audience. Ours are what I would define as a SME law firm, so kind of 2 to 7 partners, under 5 to 7 million turnover a year. What would you say their top 3 challenges or areas for focus for the coming financial year should be?
So I'm always a fan of reviewing your pricing. So that would be number one is kind of where is my hourly rate or my fixed fee? How does that compare to my peer group? So many firms fall in the trap of either not raising their prices at all or raising it by a couple of percent because that's inflation, blah, 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 and just completely losing track of where that sits them in their market space. Are you accidentally becoming the cheapest chips firm, or are you accidentally becoming the really expensive firm? Check where you are in your marketplace and think about what sort of firm you wish to be. So that would be number one. Number two, I would say, is then the efficiency of that work as it comes into the top of the hopper. How quickly are you turning it around? Why is some of it stuck in the sausage machine? And what is it that you can do to unstick it and ultimately get it out the door and turn it into an invoice? And then the third one is less financial, but I think is really important, is a lot of firms forget that we're all in professional services, right? Services being the second half of that phrase. And so, as much as we are in competition with the law firm down the road, Of course we are. We're also just in competition with other services that consumers consume. And, actually, I am used to going to McDonald's and it's super, super efficient. And I am used to picking up my iPhone and I can interact with Apple, bless them, in a few different clicks and it all sort of hyperlinks together and I don't have to tell them my name or my address over and over and over again because they've already got it. So my third thing is just kind of remembering that consumers of services are quite used to some really slick processes, some really joined up things. And yet, when I turn up at a law firm, I have to fill out a form and it's on paper. And then a few weeks later, somebody asks me for my name or my address or my telephone number again, even though I've already given it to you. So I would think very hard about not just I'm competing with whomever LLP down the road, but also I'm providing a service, and lots of other services out there in the 21st century are super efficient and super slick and very, very joined up. And is your law firm? I'll throw that out there as a question.
Yeah. I love that. It's kind of be in the shoes of the client a little bit more. So when it comes down to comparing pricing, you said about, seeing what your competitors are doing, potentially putting your prices up. In your experience, what percentage of firms actually do that work other than just going, we're just going to put a percentage inflation increase on?
So get a bit techie, right? So there's something called price elasticity of demand, which is an economic theory, which basically says there's like a bell curve as you rise your prices. And inevitably, therefore, as you rise your prices, you will lose clients. Yeah. But what the economic theory says is it is okay to lose a few clients if the price rises more than make up for that. Yeah, the maths of this is actually quite simple. Now, if I raise all of my prices by 10% and then lose 5% of my clients, that is actually a net gain. It's actually okay that I've lost some clients because the rest of them are paying more. So if that's the economic theory of it, to your question, why not find out? I think so many firms are scared of spooking one or two of their clients, and that means that all of their clients get away with not being charged enough. So raise your prices by a few percent, see if anybody squeaks. And if they don't, raise it by a little bit more. And if they still don't, raise it by a little bit more. Or if you really want to do a sort of controlled experiment, do it across different work types, do it in different offices. I suppose what I'm trying to get to is I would love it, and I'm not sure the data is out there, but I would love it if there was a law firm out there that actually really accurately could come back to you, Lara, and say, we know that we can definitely raise our prices by 11.123% because when we raised it by 12%, people whinged, but we raised it by 11% and they were fine. Or, in other words, there's this bell curve, right? Work out what your bell curve is for your particular type of law, for the particular town that you are in. Find out. And don't be scared. If you're currently here, don't be scared about raising your prices because you've probably got loads of room before you start to come to this bit of the bell curve and you start to head down again.
It's a really interesting point because a lot of the time the firms we're talking to will say, unfortunately, we don't need marketing, we're busy. And then when you start to dig a little bit deeper and you talk about, are you following up all of your inquiries, for argument's sake? I was with a firm the other week and they said, no, because we don't need any more work. So, okay, that's interesting. And also our conversion rate's really high. There's not actually a specific number for their conversion rate because it's not properly measured. But I said, if your conversion rate is anything over 60%, you're too cheap. So put your prices up and then you can have less clients. And who wouldn't want to have less clients and earn the same amount of money? So there's just, there's a really strong link obviously between finance and marketing, and making sure you're doing the right work for the right people that value it and therefore will pay the right amount of money. But it's very fascinating to me because whilst I don't know the technical stuff around finance, I am very hot on profit and cost of sale, because I personally don't understand how you can run a business without being, but I think sometimes with law particularly, you fall into running a law firm. You don't set up a law firm as such, or obviously some do, but they're in the minority. So just conscious of time and trying to stick to our 20-minute podcast level. What I ask all of my guests at the end of our session is if there is a business book that they would recommend to our audience, and or a podcast. So Tom, do you have either of those?
Business book, I think it's one that many probably are familiar with, but it sometimes is worthy of a reread. So it's a book called Traction by Gio Wickman, which is all about how to run high quality board meetings. And a lot of what I do is go and sit as my sort of non-exec finance director in a lot of board meetings. And some of them are run better than others. And some of them just become a list of relatively minor points rather than a truly kind of strategic, outward looking, what are we doing 6 or 12 months from now? So if you haven't read Traction, read it, because it's a very good way of structuring your board meetings to try and get to that. And sorry, did you say you wanted a podcast recommendation as well? It's not really a businessy one, but if you've come across anything that Tim Harford does, so he does various podcasts about kind of statistics and economics, some of them with the BBC, some of them elsewhere in the world, but Google him. He was once the BBC's economics editor, and he has some really fascinating podcasts about kind of the numbers or the data behind some of the things that you might read in the papers that just aren't true, but he takes the time to actually analyse what is actually going on.
Okay, interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tom. And thank you for listening to our audience. As always, I'd encourage you to listen to all of the different episodes that we have recorded over the last year or so. There's a wide range of topics. And as always, if you have a suggested speaker for the podcast or you'd like to nominate yourself, do reach out and get in touch with me.